There could be a utopian outcome out of this. If the war ends and Iran is weakened, which I think you disagree with that assumption, but if Iran is weakened, that means their proxies will no longer target Israel. There'll be some sort of uneasy peace between the two countries, and that could lead to, potentially more peace in the Middle East. We don't have that battle, that struggle between not only Iran and Israel, but also Iran and their neighbor Saudi. Is that a possibility? Could that be a positive outcome from all this?
I thought we had that positive outcome a year or so ago when China brokered a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran to achieve just that outcome, to reduce pressures, reduce tensions. So that possibility was already on the table. It's the United States and Israel that opted out of that. You don't need to defeat Iran to get to that outcome. Iran at full strength was ready to move in that direction and had moved in that direction. And had the United States finalized a deal with Iran on its nuclear program, I think we would be seeing peaceful coexistence. The United Arab Emirates is ready to have good trade relations with Iran. So is the rest of the Gulf. Many of them do have good trade relations. They just take place under the shadow with dhows going back and forth across the. Go to Abu Dhabi someday and go down, walk along the port, and take a look at the dhows that are parked there. They all come from Iran. So we don't need to defeat Iran to achieve. It could be defeating Iran. I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything's possible. Iran's not a undefeatable nation, but it would take a lot of resources, a lot of time, into a lot of destruction. Iran's not going to go gently into that good night. The idea that you defeat Iran without bringing down the entire neighborhood is a pipe dream. So rather than seeking the defeat of Iran, I think people should be talking about learning to live in peace with Iran.
Yeah, I am. What surprised me is your stance on the possibility of a regime change. Iranian regime is, based on many polls, is very unpopular in Iran. I think about 80% of people would like to see a new government in place, a democratically elected government that's not looking for the destruction of a neighboring country. Why do you think that's such an unlikely scenario? And by the way, I'm not for a regime change because I know that they just don't work. They've historically been just a disaster time and time again. So I know that even if a regime is not good, and we could disagree with a lot of things that they do, they could still, Libya's one of many examples, they could still be better than just complete chaos that we have now in Syria, Libya, Iraq.
In September of 2003, former Iranian President Raisi traveled to the United Nations to participate in the United Nations General Debate. And myself and several other American journalists and academics were invited to a closed meeting with the president. He surprised everybody, at least he surprised me, by starting off with a lengthy monologue talking about what had just happened in Iran over the course of the summer of 2023. If you remember, there was the tragedy of the Kurdish girl who had been arrested on a hijab violation, gone to a police station, and died under circumstances that, some say no police involvement, others blame the police. But the bottom line is the government was blamed and there were widespread demonstrations. At that time, it appears that foreign intelligence services who have been working with various groups inside Iran, the ones you could say represent the fracture of society, the Kurds in the north, Azeri separatist movements, the Ahvaz Arabs, the Baluch, the natural Shah versus revolutionary forces that still exist, the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the monarchists, all of these forces mobilized simultaneously to carry out attacks to bring down the regime. And we were aware of it. Everybody saw it unfold on TV. We saw the police stations burning. We saw the police suppressing demonstrations, the whole thing. But what Raisi said was fascinating, because he said this was the greatest threat to the Islamic Republic since the revolution, since the Iran-Iraq war. That what happened in the summer of 2023 almost brought Iran to its knees. He said it was a great struggle, but the revolutionary forces in Iran were able to come together. And here's the important thing, and win the trust of the people. And once they won the trust of the people, they were able to suppress all of this. So the notion that Iran is broken or fundamentally broken, was disproved in the summer of 2023 when the people rallied around the government. When faced with the possibility of societal collapse, political collapse, they rallied around the government. And then if we take a look at the situation today, we don't see major unraveling as this attack takes place. We don't see that happening. In fact, we see the opposite. We see anecdotal evidence to the opposite, where women without hijabs, again, I don't trust too much what I see on the internet because it can all be fabrication. But we see them speaking out. But what we don't see is what we saw in the summer of 2023. We don't see the Baluch moving up. We don't see the Afghaz Arabs coming in. We hear a lot of talk from the son of the former Shah, but doesn't resonate with any action on the ground. And most intelligence services say that the regime is more secure today than they have been at any time because the people have rallied around Iran, and they're not willing to work with foreign powers to bring down Iran, bring harm to the Iranian people. So I don't think regime change is in the books at this state of the game.
Yeah, I think if it becomes an objective, it will be disastrous for Iran in the region. Yeah. And another point, like in 2023, Israel wasn't bombing Iran. So I think we should have to take into consideration that Iran is being bombed by an enemy. When there's an enemy bombing your country, people tend to put their differences aside and rally around the government that's in power at the time. So I think so Israel's war on Iran could backfire if Israel's looking for a regime change. That's one way of looking at it. Obviously, time will tell.
But the real risk, here I am, I shouldn't be saying this. Right now, I think Iran is immune to regime change. The real risk comes once peace breaks out and the scope and scale of the damage done to Iran becomes apparent. And if the regime doesn't have a plan on how to move forward, and this is where peace becomes important, because the sustainment of sanctions against Iran would be devastating to Iran in a post-conflict environment. So I think one of the things that Iran is looking for by continuing its struggle against Israel is to get concessions on the lifting of sanctions and to get Russia and China and India and everybody else to agree to immediate economic engagement so that the rebuilding of Iran can happen almost immediately. But if Iran runs into a situation where it's stagnant for 3 to 5 years afterwards because of the continuation of sanctions, et cetera, then you can see the fractures reemerge. And dissatisfaction in the government come in, not because of what they did in the war, but how they handled the peace.
Another country that I want to ask you about is Israel. How do you think Israel will come out of this? Because we're seeing a lot of support for Netanyahu's party after this war. So he's being, hailed as a hero by some, which is very, different to what we saw after October 7th and the security failures that we saw back then. So does this war? So if you're making the argument that this war supports the regime and their popularity domestically, and we're seeing the same thing happen in Israel, wouldn't that highlight that both countries are benefiting from this war when it comes to politics?
Well, perception creates its own reality. I've said that several times. Right now, Israel is operating under the perception that it's winning, that it has severely degraded. I mean, the official pronouncement from the Israeli government is we have set the Iranian nuclear program back 2 to 4 years. That's a victory. That's a victory from the posture they claimed Iran was, where they were days or weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. Now to say because of our strike, Iran is 2 to 4 years away, that's a victory. To say that we have destroyed Iran's ballistic missile production infrastructure, that's a victory. But I don't believe any of these statements can be sustained by fact. And I'm convinced that once the missiles stop flying, the bombs stop dropping, and the Israeli people reflect back on the price they've paid and what is the real outcome, I think Netanyahu is going to be in a lot of political heat because this was an unnecessary war. This is a war that didn't need to be fought. And when it becomes clear about the potential of success of the American negotiations with the Iranians, especially if at the end of the day, part of the conflict termination deal is Iran gets 3.75% enrichment, then as an Israeli, you have to ask, why did we do this? If the outcome was 3.75% enrichment, and that was on the negotiating table between Iran and the United States, then why did we do all this? Why did we suffer this pain? And there you suddenly will find that Netanyahu's popularity will plummet.
Yeah, I think peace could lead to fracturing or could kind of lay bare to a lot of the decisions made by all parties involved. In this case, Israel is the one that declared the war. We saw that in Lebanon as well. When things eased up, we saw Hezbollah lose a lot of support after the destruction that Lebanon went through. And I think we could see potentially the same thing in Iran. Like a lot of people in Iran would look at the regime and say, look, you guys wanted death for Israel. You guys looked at leveraging those proxies to support Palestine, which could be a very, from an ethical perspective, a great cause, but for our country did not do any good. So we could see, and you might disagree, but we could see the same thing in Iran that happened in Lebanon, and that could lead to, moving away from Israel, no foreign interference, a movement within Iran against the regime. I think you disagree with that point, but it is a possibility once people see what Iran let.
Politics is so difficult to predict. Anything's possible. When you say I disagree with it, just because, the way I look at the picture right now, I would put priority on different things, and so I wouldn't come naturally to that outcome. But I'll be the first one to say that nothing is guaranteed. Nothing's carved in stone. And what we don't know, because we are sniping at this long range, all right? We're not on the ground. We don't have the finger on the pulse. And unless you do, you don't have the real picture of what's going on. The real picture might be the exact opposite of what you're saying, or the real picture might actually reinforce what you're saying and magnify it. We just don't know because we're not on the ground. And we are in a time of war where truth is going through so many filters that, it's hard to determine what the truth is, what accurate is, and all that stuff. They talk about the fog of war, and we are in the middle of the fog of war. So it's not that I would disagree. I actually welcome your statement because I think it's important that when we're talking to people about range of options, that we put out all possibilities. Nothing should be dismissed at this point in time because we are in a very volatile, fluid situation.
And Scott, one last question. By the way, the New York Times just put out a few minutes ago that Trump is not looking at retaliating against Iran's attack on the base. So that goes to the first point we said early on, that the US will likely not want to be dragged into this, and Iran likely does not want to drag the US into this, as they've said time and time again. So that's at least a piece of positive news here in the midst of the fog. One last question: what does that mean for Gaza? Because it's easy to debate what's happening in Iran and make an argument on why Israel needed to strike Iran, and make an argument on why that was not necessary, and there were peaceful ways of reaching that same outcome. The same thing could have had, same debate could have been had about on Lebanon. We had about Lebanon. Hezbollah struck Israel first. Did Israel have the right to respond? October 7th, we said the same thing about Gaza. Israel right to defend itself, entering Gaza, declaring war on Hamas. But that was ongoing, and there's nothing left in Gaza. Like, I'm in a position now where it's just heartbreaking, and it's something I'm not even able to debate with anyone on whether this war should end. I've taken the stance that the war should end. Could we finally see an end to the war in Gaza? Could we see that Israel's achieved its goals, or at least created the perception in your eyes that they've achieved those goals? They've weakened Hezbollah, or destroyed a lot of their capabilities, potentially leading to the disarmament of Hezbollah. They've weakened Iran, at least in some people's perception. I know that's not yours. But they have weakened, but maybe not to a certain extent, not as much as others would think. And they've weakened the Houthis to a certain extent. And Syria, the Assad regime, is gone. So could we be at a position where Israel's achieved all of its objective, weakened all of its enemies, and could finally start winding down all these wars? Well, the only ones left are the ones in Iran and Gaza.
I agree with the outcome, and I know how it would be spun inside Israel, but I think we can get to that outcome without conceding that Israel's won too much. First of all, let's understand that Gaza is a nightmare. It's just a 100% nightmare for Israel and the Palestinians and the world. It's just a political, humanitarian nightmare, and it's a problem that has to come to an end. But Israel is loath to concede anything on Gaza as long as Iran is over the horizon, because they see a linkage between Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, Iran. So I think we might see Trump. I get in trouble when I talk like this because then people say, "Oh, you're so pro-Trump." I'm not. I think you heard me earlier. I'm not a big fan of the guy.
You were very critical of Trump in today's interview.
Yeah, but you got to give credit where credit is due, if indeed he deserves credit. There is an opportunity here for a grand bargain, where Iran can get what it wants, which is the United States telling Israel, never again do you get to do this. Iran gets a nuclear deal that caps at 3.75% with heavy monitoring. Yemen, because you bring it into the conflict in Gaza, Yemen withdraws and is no longer firing missiles or interdicting shipment. And we already talked about Lebanon, and the fact is we have a path for disengagement of Hezbollah. So from Israel's perspective, there's the possibility of a grand bargain that resolves all of its conflicts simultaneously and allows Israel to get on the business of rebuilding. And if Trump has a brain in his head, and he is a businessman, so, and he has spoken in terms of grand bargains in the past, many of the obstacles that would have prevented such a grand bargain have been just shattered. I mean, my God, a year ago, if you were talking about, anybody bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, you were saying automatic global catastrophe, all this kind of stuff. Okay, so we've shattered that.
World War III.
Yeah. If the Iranians attacked an American base, it's over. America retaliates. Boom. That's been shattered. We have shattered every single one of these obstacles, broken it down, and we're still moving forward, surviving. And I think, again, Trump's tweet today was when I first read it, my knee-jerk reaction oftentimes when I read Trump's social media posts is to be very negative. But then my wife tells me to take a deep breath and sit back and think objectively. He sent a signal to everybody. I don't want oil prices going up. And that means that he's looking for an out. He can't say it, but he's saying, I don't want oil prices going up. I am watching you. Okay, so what did the Iranians not do? Shut down the Strait of Hormuz? They didn't attack oil fields. They simply sent 6 missiles to respond to 6 bombers. And now Trump's saying the right thing. We're done. We're done. There is the opportunity for a grand bargain to be had here, whether the United States is capable of pulling it off. But I will also say this, Vladimir Putin, who's, I don't know what your opinion of him is. I've never met the guy. I have a lot of respect for this man. I respect his maturity, his pragmatism, his rationality. And he has indicated to the United States and to Iran that he is ready and willing to be a conduit of diplomacy. And so I think that, look, the fact that the Iranian foreign minister went to Russia and after that they sent 6 missiles in means that I believe the deal is already out there. I think behind the scenes the deal is being made as we speak, because that shows a level of, not complicity is the wrong word, but connectivity. Russia isn't going to sit there and say, oh yeah, hell, attack American bases, bring about American retaliation, the whole world will go to hell.